All right, let's talk about the new Global AI Standard, ISO 42001, and specifically how you conduct an internal audit for it. Think of it less like a scary test and more like a simple health checkup for your AI systems, just to make sure everything's working the way it should be. So first, what even is this thing? Well, ISO 42001 is a pretty big deal. It's the world's very first certifiable standard for how you manage artificial intelligence. It's basically the global rulebook for building and running AI in a responsible and structured way.
Okay, so you've built your AI management system. You've got policies, you've got procedures. That's awesome. But the big question is, how do you actually prove to your boss, to your customers, to yourself that you're following those rules? Well, that's exactly where the internal audit comes in.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about the why behind this AI checkup. Then, we'll get into creating the blueprint for your audit. After that, we'll cover the actual field work. And finally, we'll look at how to turn your findings into real improvements.
Okay, Section 1, your AI checkup. Before we jump into the how-to, we've really got to understand the why. What is the standard actually expecting from an internal audit in the first place? If you look at the standard itself, Clause 9.2 is super clear. First, you have to do these audits at planned intervals. You can't just wing it. And the goal is really twofold. You're checking that your AI management system, we'll call it an AIMS, lines up with your own internal rules, and at the same time, you're checking that it meets all the requirements of the actual ISO standard. So you're being measured against your own promises and the global rulebook. On to Section 2, creating the blueprint. Look, a good audit doesn't happen by accident. It needs a rock-solid plan. This is where you map out the entire game plan before you even start looking at anything.
And that planning process really breaks down into 4 key steps. You start by setting your objectives. What are you trying to accomplish? Then you define the scope and the criteria. After that, you build out a long-term audit program. And finally, you plan the nitty-gritty details of each specific audit.
So what are these objectives? Well, it's not just about catching people doing things wrong. A huge goal is just to verify that, yep, we conform to the standard. You're also checking if your controls for managing AI risks are actually working the way you designed them to. And, maybe most importantly, this is your chance to find and fix any problems before an external auditor shows up at your door.
Next up is the scope. You have to draw a clear box around what you're auditing. As you can see here, that means spelling out which AI systems are in scope, like your customer recommender engine. It also means deciding which processes you're looking at and what the boundaries are. Are we auditing the entire company, or are we just focusing on one single department? So, what are you measuring against? That's what we call the audit criteria. Think of it as your measuring stick. On one side, you have all your own internal rules, your AI policies, your procedures. And on the other side, you've got the external standard itself. The audit has to check that you're in line with both. And this is a really crucial point. This is not a one-and-done kind of thing. You need to build an audit program, which is a long-term, multi-year plan. For your high-risk AI systems, you'll probably want to audit them annually. If something is safety critical, you'll re-audit it after any major change. But for lower-risk stuff, you might only need to check in every couple of years. It's all about focusing your time and energy where it matters most.
All right, Section 3, conducting the field work. We've got our blueprint. The plan is ready. Now it's time for the actual examination. This is where we move from what's written down on paper to what's actually happening in the real world.
You know, every audit really has 2 sides of the same coin. First, there's the document review. That's checking what your policies and procedures say you do. Then there's the field work. That's finding out what people actually do day to day. And the real magic of an audit is comparing those 2 things. So the whole thing usually kicks off with a document review. The auditors are going to ask for things like your main AI policy, your risk assessments, that list of all your AI systems, and your development procedures. Looking at these documents first gives them a kind of map of your world and helps them find any big gaps before they even talk to anyone.
But of course, paperwork only tells half the story. To really get the full picture, you have to talk to people. A lot of people. Auditors will want to speak with the engineers building the models, the product owners, the security and privacy folks, legal, you name it. They're trying to get a complete 360-degree view.
And during these interviews, they use really smart, open-ended questions, something like this one. How do you decide whether an AI change is safe to release? See, a question like that is powerful because it doesn't ask what the procedure says, it asks what you do, and it forces a real practical answer. Now, auditors can't check every single thing, obviously, so they use a technique called sampling. They might pick one specific AI system, say your customer service chatbot, and just do a really deep dive on that one system. They'll ask to see its actual risk assessment, its real training data documents, maybe even its monitoring logs from last Tuesday. That's what keeps the audit grounded in reality. And that brings us to our final section, from findings to improvement. Okay, the examination is over, the results are in, so now what? Honestly, this is where the audit creates the most value.
The results of an audit are called findings, and they get sorted by how serious they are. A major nonconformity is a big deal, a systemic failure. A minor one is more like an isolated slip-up. An observation is basically a heads-up about a potential problem down the road, and an opportunity for improvement is just a friendly suggestion.
Now this is so important. A proper audit finding is not just an auditor's opinion. Every single finding has to be documented with three things: the specific rule or requirement that wasn't met, the hard evidence the auditor found to prove it, and an explanation of why it matters. What's the risk here?
Once all the findings are written up, a formal communication process kicks off. It usually starts with a closing meeting to go over the results with the teams involved. That's followed by a formal, written audit report. And finally, those results have to be presented to senior leadership.
But remember, the whole point of this exercise is to get better. For every single nonconformity, you have to dig in and find the root cause, create a real plan to fix it, and, this is the part people often forget, you have to go back and verify that your fix actually worked. That's what closes the loop and makes sure you're always improving.
So, I'll just leave you with this final thought. Your AI is constantly changing, constantly learning. The big question is your governance keeping up? The internal audit isn't just about passing a test. It's the tool that makes sure your management system evolves right alongside your technology. Thanks for tuning in.